Good evening, everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your evening to join us on this webinar, session number 2 of our Did You Know series. And this one is called Simplifying the Code. And we will be going over some different rules dealing with the rules of tennis, general rules, hindrances, some of the roles of officials at tournaments. We'll touch on sportsmanship, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers. I know that also some questions were submitted prior to this webinar, and we will answer as many of those as we can during the webinar. First of all, my name is Chris Wilson. I'm the Officials and Competition Coordinator at USTA NorCal. At the end of this slide deck, you will see a sheet with the entire junior department, our contact information, and how you can get in touch with us if you have any questions about junior tennis, the rules, junior team tennis, and things like that. So we're going to jump right in. One of the biggest topics that we get is whose call is it? So we're going to talk about some different types of situations that happen and who is responsible for making those calls. First of all, a player is responsible for making all the calls on their side of the net or that are heading in their own direction. So, for example, whose call is it for a double bounce? This was one of the questions that we had submitted. A double bounce is, the official term is actually not up. And this is a call that a player is responsible for calling against themselves because it is on their own side of the court and the ball is coming in their direction and they hit it after it bounces twice. Some of the other calls that players are responsible for calling against themselves. If a player touches the net while the ball is in play, you need to call that. If a player hits a ball twice, not in one continuous motion, that's another one. Player touching a ball as it's going out of play, but before it lands. So that includes if you are back near the fence and the ball is going way out, everybody knows it's going out. If you touch the ball before it lands out of play, you lose that point, and you need to call that on yourself. The other one is a player hits the ball prior to the ball crossing the plane of the net. So a player can reach over the net and hit a ball only after it has crossed the net. So an example of a legal way of hitting the ball on the other side of the net is if your opponent hits a drop shot and the backspin or the wind after it bounces on your side of the court goes backwards and goes back over the net again, you can then reach over the net to hit that ball. But if there's a lob and you hit an overhead or a volley before the ball crosses the plane of the net, that is called a foul stroke, and you must call that on yourself. When it comes to making calls and your opponent making calls, it's essential that you give your opponent the benefit of the doubt. You really want to remember that players generally try to make the correct call all the time. Just because a bad call may be made does not mean that your opponent is cheating. When you have officials on your court, the officials are also trying to make the correct call every time. However, players and officials make mistakes. We all make mistakes. It happens. With line calls, your opponent may be running when they're trying to make a call on a close line call, and it's not always possible for them to make the correct call without making a mistake. It is fine to ask your opponent if they're sure of their call, and if they say they're sure of their call, then you must play and give them the benefit of the doubt. If you feel that there is a pattern of incorrect calls or mistakes being made, you can then go and contact either the referee or the tournament desk to get a court monitor or a roving umpire to your court to come and watch. But again, It's always good to give your opponent the benefit of the doubt, and according to the code, that's what we must do. If you're making a call on a line call on your side of the net, you have to give your opponent the benefit of the doubt on a close call. If it is too close where you can't see if the ball is clearly out, that means that you must call it in. Okay, hindrances are another subject that we get a lot of questions on. We'll start off with one of the questions that was submitted prior to the webinar. A ball drops out of my own pocket during the point. Can I call a let and replay the point? The answer to that is no. A player cannot hinder himself. Only the opponent or an official can call a let for this. And it's the same for a hat falling off. And if that happens, if your opponent's hat falls off or if a ball falls out of their pocket and you're going to call a let, you need to call it immediately. You can't wait until the end of the point, lose the point, and then go back and say, your hat fell off, we're going to replay the point. It needs to be timely. You can't have two chances of winning the point. So it needs to be called right away. And it also needs to be something that can hinder you. You actually have to have a play on the ball. So if your opponent, if a ball falls out of your opponent's pocket while they're hitting an overhead, and they hit an overhead to the completely opposite side of the court that you're on, and you have no play on the ball, that's not a hindrance. There's two different types of hindrances. There's intentional and unintentional. Intentional hindrances, some of the examples of that where you would lose the point for the first time it happening is if you hit what you feel is a winner and you yell something like come on or something trying to pump yourself up while the ball is still in play and the opponent can get to that ball, that opponent is entitled to the point. A hindrance can be called by either the opponent or an official. Another example of an intentional hindrance would be a doubles team talking while the ball is going towards their opponent. That's not allowed. So when you're playing doubles, you can talk to your opponent while the ball is coming towards you, about line calls, leave it, things like that. But once the ball is going towards your opponent, you're not allowed to talk. So that would be also an intentional hindrance. Also, making deliberate motions with the sole purpose of distracting the opponent, such as standing at the net and waving your arms and your racket up in the air, tapping the court with your racket right when the opponent is hitting a serve or a shot. Things like that would be considered deliberate and intentional hindrance, and if it's called by an official, you would lose the point. Unintentional hindrances are hindrances where you would replay the point. An example of that, again, would be a ball falling out of a player's pocket, a hat falling off during a point, or if you get stung by a bee and you yell something when you get stung, that would be considered unintentional. So the one like the ball falling out of a player's pocket and the hat falling off, if an official were to call those, you would actually replay the point, and then the official would give you a warning that if the same thing were to happen again, then you would lose the point. But the first time it's an unintentional hindrance, and if an official doesn't call it, then it would remain an unintentional hindrance if it happened again. Okay, if a ball rolls onto your court, but on your opponent's side of the court, can you call this? Yes, either player may call this, provided that the call is made promptly. Again, you need to call it timely. If a ball comes into the court or behind the court and you don't call it and the point ends, the point is going to stand. You can't go back after the point is over and say there was a ball that came through. We're going to replay the point. So that's one of the key topics here is that all points played in good faith stand. So once the point is over, the point is over. You can't go back and replay it if you don't call that let timely. Okay, my son mistakenly called a ball out and then immediately corrected himself and said that the ball was in, and then the point continued. What should be done? So the player that made the incorrect call loses the point immediately. you can't once that out call is made, the point should stop, and if the call is corrected, he loses the point. And that is, he loses the point whether it's corrected by an official or by himself. We don't replay the point based on a corrected line call. Okay, now we're gonna go over some general rules, some other things that come up. The question I was asked recently by a player is, when can a player leave the court? Because they were afraid that they might get penalized for leaving the court to go get water, and that's not the case. So a player can leave the court for any of the following reasons. To contact an official, that can happen at any time when there is a question of a rule, or a question of a pattern of bad line calls, or a scoring dispute. Anytime that a player needs to get a referee or a roving umpire involved, they can leave the court to go and find one, either to, if they see one, they can go over to that official, or they can go to the tournament desk and request an official. And they can wait to play until an official comes to that court. Another reason that let them know if you can, but if you really have to go, then that is an authorized reason to leave the court. Getting water on a changeover or set break when water is not available on the court is an acceptable time to leave the court. The key is that it needs to be on a changeover or a set break, and you need to just hustle and go get it as quickly as possible and be back as close to the time to start the next game as you can. Also, to replace equipment such as a broken shoe or a tire, or necessary equipment, not including a racket or a wheelchair. Just to simplify that a little bit, the racket and the wheelchair are not equipment that would allow you extra time to leave the court, but a broken shoe or a shoelace would be reason. Also, another one would be like a contact lens, things like that. If they break, you can leave the court, and you actually have reasonable time, up to 15 minutes, to replace that equipment. And talking about the racket, and wheelchair would qualify under this also. Can a player leave the court if he breaks his last racket and needs another one from the car or the pro shop or wherever? Yes, the player can leave, but the player is not allowed any additional time to do so. So they will get code violations for delay of game for each 25 seconds that the player is gone. So in amateur tennis, unlike professional tennis, you can play with a broken racket. So if you need to play with a broken racket until you get to a changeover or a set break, that would buy the player a little bit more time to go and get a racket, because then they're going to have the 90-second changeover or the 2-minute set break to leave the court and go get that. If they're not back in time, they're going to get a code violation for delay of game, which would start at a point penalty, and then 25 seconds later a game penalty, and then if they're still not back 25 seconds later after that, then they would be defaulted. And we don't want that to happen, but that is the rule when it comes to rackets. Is a player allowed to change tennis rackets not based on equipment failure? Have one for serving and one for receiving. This was another question that was submitted prior to the webinar. Yes, this is allowed. Players can use as many rackets as they want. They just have to make sure that if they're going to go back to their bench to change the racket, that they stay within the time limitations between points and games. We'll talk a little bit about timing in between points and how the time between points is more of a guideline than a rule, but when it comes to something like this, that would not be something that you would have any extra time to do, to go and change a racket if you have one for serving and one for receiving. Okay, when the ball in play hits a lamppost, do you replay the point? And the answer to this is no. The lamppost is considered a permanent fixture, and the player who hit the lamppost would lose the point. This is very similar to the same thing as if a ball hits an umpire chair or a ball kid or anything off of the court. It would just be considered out, and you would lose the point. Okay, so coin toss is before I explain the question, I'll just want to make sure that when you have that when you have a coin toss or a racket spin before the match, you have several choices that the winner of the coin toss can make. One is whether they serve or receive. Second choice is that they can choose side of the court. And the third choice is that they can defer the choice to their opponent, and then the opponent would have to choose first. So this question here, if I win the toss and elect to choose the side to start on, must I say which side before the other team chooses to serve or receive? And the answer is yes. If you win the toss and you're going to choose side, you need to tell which side it's going to be. I think the reason that the question is being asked is that the player might want to say, well, okay, I want to choose side, but I want to find out what my opponent is going to do so that I can make sure that I choose the side where the sun is going to be to my advantage or benefit, or to my opponent's weakness. You can't do that. However, if you defer the choice to your opponent, that will force them to make their choice first. And then once they make their choice, whether it be side or serve, then you can choose the side or serving that will benefit you with the sun. So there is a way to do that. It's just not to say I'm going to choose the side, but then decide which side after they make their choice. Okay, if play is supposed to happen at the server's pace, what happens if the receiver is constantly not ready? The answer, the ruling answer to that is that the receiver needs to be ready at the reasonable pace of the server. If you feel that your opponent is not playing to your pace and that it is a reasonable pace, contact an official. The official will come out to the court and monitor, and if appropriate, they will either remind the receiver that they need to move a little bit quicker in between points, or issue a time violation if they feel that is the appropriate step to take. Okay, scoring disputes. We see a lot of scoring disputes at tournaments, and again, just because players can't agree on the score does not always mean that they're manipulating the score or that they're trying to cheat on the score. Most of the time, it's just that the players don't agree. Somebody forgets what happens. And we really want the players to work this out on their own if they can. Referees and roving officials, you'll notice generally when there's a scoring dispute, when the players are at the net, will kind of stand back and not immediately go to the net post where they are, because we do want the players to work out these scoring disputes if they can. If we notice that the players are taking a while to resolve it, or if maybe the conversation is getting a little bit more heated, then the official will walk out to the court and get involved in doing this. If an official does not see this happening and you know that you're going to need an official, again, this is a time where you can leave the court and go to the tournament desk or find a referee to come out and help you with the scoring dispute. When that happens, when you have to go and get an official, if you're walking back to the court with the official, just let them know that it's a scoring dispute. You don't want to start telling them your side of the story at that point, because the official should at that point anyway tell you to wait until you get back to the court so that both players have an equal opportunity to give their side. But if you're not able to find an official right away, or if you want to try working out the scoring dispute, The first step in doing so is to replay only the points that are in dispute. For example, if player A believes that the score is 40-30, and player B believes that the score is 30-40, and you can remember just about everything that happened in that game. The only thing that the players don't remember is the second point. You would only go back and replay that second point, which means that you're going to agree that each player won 2 points, but because it's the second point that is in dispute, you're going to go ahead and play that from the ad side, just as if it was 15 love or love 15. And then if player A wins that point, it's going to be 40-30. If player B wins that point, it's going to be 30-40. And now you're going to go ahead and play the next point from the ad side again. So you'd actually play 2 consecutive points from the ad side to resolve that dispute. And then you would just continue from that point on. If that is not possible, the next step that you would do, or an official would have you do, is to try to play from a mutually agreed upon score, which may mean in the same scoring dispute, you might not remember, the order of the points, but you might each remember that you won 2 points and agree to that. And the best that you can do is to go back to a mutually agreed upon score of either 30-all, 30-15. Could even go back to the beginning of the game if you can't remember anything. And that would be the mutually agreed upon score. The third option after that, which is definitely a last resort and one that I do not like to get to. In fact, I've only done this once in my officiating career, is to toss a coin to determine the score. I think most people would rather go back to the beginning of a game than to have an important point settled by a coin toss. So we don't want to get to that step. We really want players to be able to work it out to replay only the points that are in dispute or play from a mutually agreed upon score. But that is how we would settle the scoring dispute. Okay, we have one. I just noticed a question in the Q&A. Can a player get water on a change of ends during a tiebreak? And the short answer to that is no, because it's not a changeover. It is literally just a change of ends. So it's not a changeover or a set break. So if they can run, if the water is really close and they can run out there and get it and be back and ready to play at the other side of the court within the time limitation, then I would say then it might be okay, but they're not going to get additional time or changeover time to go ahead and get water on a change of ends during a tiebreak. Okay, we're gonna talk a little bit about the difference between court officials and tournament staff, some of the roles and what they're trying to do out there. The referee and umpires, whether it be roving umpires or chair umpires, are responsible for the rules and regulations, and should be called when there are issues on the court. You should have a head referee, and then all of the other officials working the tournament are roving umpires. The head referee is the final call on a question of rule or tennis law. When it comes to line calls or any kind of judgment calls, the roving umpire that's on the court or that comes out and helps you would be the final call on any question of fact, like a line call. So those kinds of calls cannot be appealed if they're made by a roving umpire. However, if something happens and you're playing a match and you feel that the official made a wrong decision on a rule of tennis, or incorrectly gave a code violation, or incorrectly defaulted a player, that roving umpire can be appealed. So you can actually appeal that decision to the head referee. So if something happens and you feel that the call is incorrect and it's a question of a rule, you can ask the official if they're the roving umpire or the referee, and if they're not the referee, you can appeal that. Now, if the referee makes the call, then that is the final decision. That call can't be appealed to the tournament director or any kind of appeals committee unless it is a question of a default. And if you can go to the next slide, I'm going to talk about that there. So yeah, the tournament director is responsible for the administration of the tournament and is not able to make rulings or decisions regarding defaults for lateness or rulings on court. So it is not the tournament director. However, we would have a tournament appeals committee, and if a player is defaulted, that player can then appeal their default to the tournament appeals committee if defaulted by the referee. Okay. Okay, sportsmanship and parent and spectator issues at tournaments. So we had a few questions about sportsmanship behavior. One was, what should I do when another parent is coaching their child during a match? What should I do when the other player is cheating? So the answer to both of those is contact a roving umpire or the referee. If there's a line call dispute, the player should contact the referee, not the parent. We always want to encourage the player to be the one, because first of all, one of the things that I've noticed in my career as an official is that sometimes a parent will come and complain to an official that their child's opponent is cheating, making bad line calls, and then we go out to the court and find out that there actually are no issues. The parent's perspective of the line calls is a lot different than their kids, and the kid is actually happy with the match and not having any issues with the opponent's line calls. So we always want to encourage the player to be the one to come and get an official when there are disputes about line calls, because sometimes that is the case. Sometimes the players are able to work it out on their own. And sometimes it's after one questionable line call that the parent comes, and we don't want to have players or parents coming after one line call. The rule says that a player can contact an official for a pattern of bad line calls. But if there's an issue with another parent off of the court, or a coach or a spectator, then yes, definitely you as a parent can come and find the referee or go to the tournament desk and ask for assistance with that, because that is something off the court that the other player might not see. Yeah, so that definitely you can contact the referee on your own. Okay, so going over the point penalty system a little bit, I just want to reiterate, because when a point penalty is given, often the response from the player or the parent is, well, why didn't my son get a warning? And USTA tennis has no warnings, unlike professional tennis where they do. First offense for a code violation under the point penalty system is a point. Second offense would be a game penalty, and the third offense would be a default. The only one that can be skipped to is a default in case of flagrant or egregious code violation, such as verbal abuse of a player or an official, any kind of physical abuse. Those types of things could constitute an immediate default. As I said earlier, default penalties may be appealed before the player leaves the court, but must be appealed within 15 minutes to either the head referee or the tournament appeals committee. Regardless of who defaults a player, if the player is going to appeal it, they need to tell that official that they're going to appeal the default so that the process can be started. USTA NorCal for junior tournaments adheres to a zero tolerance policy for unsportsmanlike conduct. As such, even borderline behavior may still be penalized under the point penalty system without a caution or what we call a soft warning. This applies to parents as well as spectators associated with the players. So if a parent is acting in an unsportsmanlike manner off the court, and it's affecting the play on court, the player that is associated with that spectator can be penalized immediately for that, up to a default penalty, depending on the severity of the behavior. And that is fairly new over the last few years, that players could be penalized right away for actions of their parents or coaches. So another thing we touched on earlier was timing. Just want to go over to make sure that that you understand how much time you have in between points. The server has 25 seconds between points to start the next point. However, because there's no ball kids, some of the courts are large in area, and sometimes the balls are on opposite sides of the courts. It's not practical to constantly keep a player to a 25-second maximum in between points. So as a receiver, you may feel that your server is taking too long. However, if you contact an official and they come out and watch and they feel that the player is not stalling and they're really trying their best to just go and get the balls and get ready to play, nothing will be done. Where officials will get involved is if a player is taking too much time because they're going to their towel too often, or they're deliberately hitting balls to the opposite side of the court so that they have to go chase them to delay the game. Things like that will cause an official to get involved and let the players know that they need to move quicker or issue time violations, either a warning or a point penalty. And then as the receiver has to be ready at the reasonable pace of the server. And again, the key word there is reasonable. Quick serving is not allowed as a way to cause a time violation on an opponent. And if a player is serving really fast in between points, the receiver does not have to be ready at that fast pace. So the pace needs to be reasonable. And then as long as the receiver is playing to that reasonable pace, there's no issue. Okay, one of the questions about timing is if the changeover is 90 seconds, but the players take 20 to 30 seconds walking to the scorecard to change it, how long can they be seated? There's not extra time put onto the changeover because of that, so they still need to be ready to play within 90 seconds. When you have a roving umpire on the court or a chair umpire, on a 90-second changeover, the official will call time after 60 seconds has elapsed, giving the players 30 seconds more to put the ball in play. On a set break, which is 2 minutes, the official would call time at 90 seconds. So if they take 20 or 30 seconds walking to the card to change it, they're going to have 30 to 40 seconds to remain seated before time is going to be called and they need to go and start the next game. So I see another question in the Q&A. Does the appeal have to be done before the next point? And I'm assuming that you're talking about an appeal, like an appeal of a ruling. Yes, that would need to be done before the next point is played. You can't go back. You can't play another point and then go back and appeal a ruling of the roving umpire to the referee. Okay, so that finishes the part about the rules and sportsmanship of this webinar. So just want to go over a couple of things. The USTA junior competition info. There is a link on this page, and the recording and these slides will be available. So USTA.com/NorCal junior competition will give you all the information that that you need regarding junior competition in NorCal. including what has been referenced during this webinar. So that's a very valuable resource. Another actual resource that can be used when it comes to the rules and the code and the code of conduct is the Friend at Court, which is the USTA rulebook. And when we send out the info, that actually is on the junior competition page also. So that's another resource that you have. And then this slide here shows the contact information for the junior competition team at USTA NorCal. So if you have questions regarding any of these programs, junior tournaments, NetGen, junior team tennis, player development, rules and regulations, sportsmanship, you can contact any of us in our department, and we would be more than happy to assist where we can. Okay, so if you have any other questions, I'll stay on for a few more minutes to see if anything is submitted in the Q&A section. Other than that, if you think of something later, you can submit a question for our team at the link below. And your questions may actually be used in upcoming webinars because we're going to continue this series of Did You Know webinars. So we appreciate the questions that we get. The questions for this webinar were very good. They were pretty much right on point to what we were going to be discussing. So we thank you for that. So we'll wait a couple more minutes to see if there's any other questions or feedback that you have in the Q&A section. I'm not sure if this was answered, but can a player go use the bathroom at any changeover? So typically we would want the players to wait until a set break if they can. However, in USTA tennis, the rule is that if they need to go, they can go at any time for a bona fide bathroom break, as long as an official does not determine it to be a gamesmanship issue. So yes, the player can use the bathroom at any changeover. But for me, for example, as an official, if it's at 5-4 or 6-5 and the player wants to go to the bathroom, my first question is going to be, can it wait to the set break? If the player absolutely cannot wait until the set break, then they are going to be able to go at that time. So I hope that answers that question. And then incorrect scoring issues can be prevented. I think I know where this question is going. It wasn't completed, but yeah. So incorrect scoring disputes and things like that can be prevented if the player is calling. The server should be calling the score before every point. So if the server is calling the score out properly before every point, then that should definitely cut down on the scoring disputes. And in fact, when an official comes out for a scoring dispute, one of the things that they're typically going to remind the players when they leave is that they should be calling the score every time before they serve. So that is a good point. I thank you for that. And it looks like that is all at this time. So we'll go ahead and close out the webinar. Thank you again for attending, and feel free to reach out to any of us at our team if you have any questions later on.